Kryptonana, exit liquidity, hodl-nana, dump it all. Kryptonana, exit liquidity, hodl-nana, dump it all.
Kryptonana, exit liquidity,
dump it all.
hodl-nana, dump it all. From the day we arrive on the blockchain and blinking step into the trade, there's more to lose than can never be won, more to dump than can never be saved. Influencers, tweets, and the noobs all follow, buying high, selling low at a game. But the boomers know, and Sailor, he knows that the dump is coming. It's all the same. It's the circle of exit liquidity, and it moves us all through despair and hope, through faith and FOMO, till we find our place on the path unwinding, our place on the path unwinding in the circle of exit liquidity. Some of us fall by the wayside, and some of us soar to the stars, but the influencers always win with the Lambos and their cars. So beware of the pump and the inevitable dump, for the cycle continues and the news get wrecked. Kryptonana, exit liquidity, hodl-nana, dump it all. Kryptonana, exit liquidity, hodl-nana, dump it all. Kryptonana, exit liquidity, dump it all. hodl-nana, dump it all. It's the circle of exit liquidity, and it moves us all through despair and hope, through faith and FOMO, till we find our place on the path unwinding in the circle of exit liquidity. Dump it all.
Kryptonana, exit liquidity, hodl-nana, dump it all. Kryptonana, exit liquidity.
So, hey everyone. We're going to roll the actual intro in just a second, but I just wanted to say hi to the one and only Paul Sztorc. How have you been today? It's been a heavy media day for you, right?
It has.
Out of curiosity, how many shows have you done today, or how many have you done so far, and how many will you do?
Well, I would always accept any podcast invitation, no matter how hostile.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll probably do, as many as, if people want to hear what I have to say, I'll keep doing them, I suppose. But a pre-recorded, I think 4, right? And then today I did 3, but they were pretty long. I think this one will be pretty long.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, at least an hour or so. I mean, it could be more than that. We'll see. It is however long it actually ends up being. I have to say, I'm no Vlad Kostia. I'm not one of those 8-hour podcast people.
Yeah.
I could, but I kind of feel like a lot of that is like not a good use of time to go like 8 hours.
And then do people like really listen to the whole thing? That's a big ask. I don't know.
Yes.
Excuse to just tune it out sometimes.
Yes, of course. I mean, it's a great like bragging rights thing, or bladder things. I am pretty sure I've gone 8 hours without going to the bathroom before, but like I have done 5 hours straight of like podcasts, but like one after another several times in the last year. But like, is it for a reason? It's just like that's kind of listen. I have to say before I continue, I'm not shitting on Vlad. I think he's a great dude and he has a compelling podcast. I'm just riffing off the concept of pushing the endurance sport of the podcasting, because it's sort of like the communist labor theory of value.
Are you doing it because you really have so much content, or are you doing it just because you want to say that you've done it?
Yeah. I think it's more of a let it run 8 hours rather than push it to 8 hours. Right. So it's kind of an interesting thing. But yeah, I mean, short form, long form, I'm not succinct enough to do really short. It's funny because I'm kind of at the ends of the spectrum, where most of my shows are 60 to 90 minutes plus, right? So it's like 60, 90, 120 minutes, something like that. Sometimes longer. I've done 2.5 to 3 hour shows before. I do typically 3 hour spaces every week, but then also I do sometimes 60-second to 3-minute videos. And I did some like rant video a couple days ago that was like 3 minutes. It was very popular. But just like the 5-minute, 10-minute, 20-minute, up to 30-minute, that's not really a zone I exist in a lot.
I think that some people like the 9-hour podcast because it's really, really hard to like put up like an act or fake something for that long. So it's kind of like, it's like stress testing a CPU or something. It's like, okay, you're gonna get a picture of who this person is that you wouldn't get in little sound bites.
I sort of feel like you have to push it past 60 minutes to get people's guards down, sort of, or get their defenses down. I sort of feel like 90, like if I were to pick a sweet spot to do all podcasts, I would probably pick 90 minutes because you kind of get the last 30 minutes are like, you can't maintain the facade for, like I could stretch a facade for an hour, probably. Not that I would, but it's just after that, I kind of feel like you get that, but then if you always do 2-hour shows, sometimes they might get boring. Right.
I definitely think, you do 60 minutes. Well, you also, 60 minutes, you have a shared experience with someone else. So it's a little bit more complex.
Well, fun stuff. Well, let's roll the, 20-second intro thing, and then we'll get right into it.
All right, let's do it.
All right, 3, 2, 1, go. So hey everyone, welcome officially now to the Digital Cash Rundown, episode 225, which means I've been doing this over 225 weeks in a row, probably since mid-2020, and I'm joined by the one and only, at least that I know of, Paul Sztorc. How's it going, man?
It's going good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to have you on. You've been on a kind of the more interviewee segment version before, talking about kind of the core thesis that we're going into in more of like a new crypto project kind of thing. And ahead of getting into the details, I have to say that this podcast is very proudly sponsored by no one at all. I had a sponsor before and don't currently, and so no one is paying me. People were sharing a graphic of like podcast budget stuff for this new eCash thing and insinuating that I took a piece, but I didn't. And or if I did, I mean, where is it, man? I mean, you're late. But, and
Well, I guess that's weird for people, but I guess it's understandable. People want to just think like there's no real reason why. I mean, it's bizarre on one hand because you can go to like the layer2labs.com/friends list and you can see all these people who are enthusiastic. This is not about eCash specifically, the hard fork, but they're enthusiastic about Drivechain, the idea. And this is a giant list of like big intellectual leaders in the space. So it's kind of like, is it really so hard to believe that there is genuine interest in this idea? But I guess that's just something that people have to go to.
yeah, for sure. So I do want to give a shout out to another friend of the show. And as again, I'm a man of my word. I made a promise. So let me throw this up on the screen here. Earlier on, during this, when I announced that I was going to do this show, we had some of our friendly eCashers, again, the other eCash, the other semi-major eCash,
Yes.
asking about have you paid for the interview, whatever. And I just said, I'm not. And then about the name, and I just said, like, it's a generic enough name in crypto and has been since long before the ABC fork. Unfortunately, ABC fork founder, Daedalnix, hello, mister, said, this is bullshit. I expected better from you. I said, no, it's not. He says, of course it is. Between that and stealing Satoshi's coins, which we'll get into that part later.
Yes.
It is. But it'll be controversial and therefore print views. I get it. I just thought you were above this. And so I said I would mention this on the show. So I will. So first of all, I have here up on the screen I believe it was eCash launched, the other one launched somewhere in late 2020. It was named eCash by July of 2021. And here's a big long list of everywhere P2P eCash system, eCash, everywhere, well before that date that I selected specifically. You have Adam back on here somewhere I saw. You have plenty of people. Of course, David Cham with Chamian eCash. And then there was even an Ethereum project called Ethereum Cash or eCash. So many of these. And so as far as like the clicks, by the way, so just this is my podcast front page. Just click on the channel. You can corroborate this. And you look at popular videos. This is not a huge channel, right? I don't get very many views. Maybe this one will. But you look at some of these top ones I got. Like I mentioned the Joe Rogan Spotify thing 5 years ago, and that got a decent amount. When Zcash had its big kind of renaissance. And then Ben Swan, who's a significant person. What's his name? Emin Gunsir talking about Avalanche back when it like first launched. Roger Ver coming on this show talking about hijacking Bitcoin. Again, 3K views. Not bad, but not great. Monero hack. These are my most popular videos ascending. We got some Dash one because very close with the Dash community on this channel. A lot of my first subscribers, of course. How to live on crypto ones, running a Lightning node. Second highest view count. Why does the price of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies go up? Of course. Most popular video. Amari Sachet on Bitcoin ABC's rebirth as eCash. Oh my goodness. So we're saying maybe I had him on because it was just popular and for the clicks. Maybe it's something about the eCash
maybe.
thing. Ooh, I wonder if that's...
but I think part of your point was like that, you're basically getting like 5,000 views or something like
when I'm very lucky, yes.
On a good day. So people think like, why would I pay for it? No, I'm just kidding. Just joking about that. But it's kind of like,
pay much for it,
Well, yeah. Okay. So I'll tell the story of the name. I feel terrible that it is the same as Amari's project. And I have to say, I think the true story makes them look like even worse in a way. It may make me look bad also. I think it's just a bad story all around. But basically,
fine. But it is a competitive term, and they're
of course, like email. It's like whatever. So I've noticed that in the summer. Okay, so this is like back in a long time ago. I think it was maybe 2021 or 2022. I was talking to someone. I was interested in domains because I was kind of interested in this project. This idea of what would you name a hard fork of Bitcoin? And yeah, I checked like a few really good domains, and they were like it was like I had like eCoin and eCash. So there was a list of these names like this. Now, of course, I may be misremembering or I may have mixed up one of the domains, but I looked at like, some like 5 or 6 premium domains. Everyone wanted like $8 million for these domains. So I think this was like because like altcoining was like really big or something. I'm not sure. We didn't have like Bitcoin season 2 and we didn't have like the collapse of altcoins. So yeah, and then basically last summer I was just kind of like cold messaging some of these people, and I was like, can we work something out? Or like if I raise a lot of money, you get like a %. And then they just told me that they would sell me the domain. They had a whole set of eCash.com with the date, eCash.net and whatever, and they were like, we'll just give you the whole set for like much. I don't want to say exactly how much. I'm not sure if that's like appropriate or like just too much, like a kitchen table type of a thing. But let's just say it was a lot less than it was less than $250,000 for all of them. So we're talking like huge. So I was like, oh, okay, great. So then before I did that though, I looked around to see, is this name in use? And I honestly, hand on the Bible, I had no idea it was Omri's project at all, and I feel bad about that. But I looked it up, and I was like, oh, this is just some project that's 160th on CoinMarketCap. And I thought, well, I can't name, once we get to like number 12, like, I don't know, I've never heard of like any of those projects. You know what I mean? Like I know a couple. I know like a few altcoin names, but I don't know. If you go to a guy on the street and you say, can you name me the top 200 altcoins? They're just going to say like, I don't know. So yeah, I looked it up and I didn't look into it any further because I just thought, well, I'm going to get the .com and it's 160. So 160 might as well be infinity, like as far as I'm concerned. So that's what I thought. And I thought, oh, this will be great. Now, of course, I knew that wherever this community is, they'll probably be mad about but I think I might have done it differently had I known that it was another hard fork of Bitcoin and it was also Omri's thing. But I sent Omri a note saying, after I found this out, I sent him like a Telegram message and I was like, oh, I'm sorry about this name. And I told him the exact same story and it got 2 check marks. So he got it and he read it, but he didn't reply. He didn't say anything. So that was months. Yeah, this was months ago. So, but he was complaining to you, I guess. I don't know. So that's the story.
I'll have him back on if he apologizes. Yeah, that's fine.
So that's the story about that. So yeah, I didn't know. But yeah, I don't think. I mean, the entire market cap of the other eCash is like less than 150 million. And I in contrast, when Bitcoin Cash like debuted in November 2017, it quickly became the #1 altcoin. For like a day. It didn't last. But that was the origin of that famous tweet from Vitalik when he said, congrats on this seriously, as you probably remember. So like, we're talking like contending for the #1 spot in the case of BCH, albeit for a day, briefly for one day. And then, if you look at like the market caps are like logarithmically distributed. You know what I mean? So like once you get out of like the top 3 are like most of the value, and then like the top 10 are like the huge percent, and then there's all this long tail of low value projects. There's this scree or whatever as it's sometimes called in statistics. So it's like, I mean, yeah. So I don't really I don't think of that as a legitimate contender for the name. And then you have the .com. That's good. But yeah, I regret that to some extent. I don't know. Well, if my project is 160th on CoinMarketCap, like, I've just got to tell everyone, like, I would be giving up at that point. Or I would not be caring about other people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if that's what you have to care about, then, the project's in bad shape. Because I would just say, oh yeah, I understand why. What I would do is I would actually, if I were 160th on CoinMarketCap and someone else wanted to launch something with a different name, I would say, oh, we'll sell you the domain, I would sell them all the assets and maybe give those I would tell the community, hey, listen, our project isn't going very well, but I'm going to sell this stuff and we're going to distribute the proceeds of the sale to everyone and we're going to close up shop is maybe what I would do. I really do think like there will be either one cryptocurrency that succeeds and the rest will fail. So yeah, I just like, I don't, I already think it's a very rivalrous situation. You're not going to make a lot of friends. So yeah, it's tough. eCash is a really good name because it speaks to privacy. It speaks to sovereignty. It's a great name, and it's tough because you either got to pick a bad name, you got to like invent a name like Kubernetes or something, and you either got to invent a weird name. And
yeah, I have to
like
admit, the naming space is tough, and like if we were to really think back, Bitcoin is kind of a dumb name a little bit. I
hated it at first. Yeah, for like at
cool,
least a year, I was like, I hate this name, but it makes sense because it's BitTorrent and it's coin. So
or like bits and
okay.
bytes, like Bytecoin, Bitcoin, like those kinds of things. It sounds like it's like nerdy and niche sounding, but like the fact that you have just presidents of the United States and people like that talking about it is like it's a little cringe at this point, but it's also so built into the lexicon of the world that it works. eCash, the thing about eCash is it's sort of like a very well understood concept, I guess. Like people have heard of, like if there was no crypto at all and people are talking about like it's kind of building like an eCash system, or like eCash is a good, like even people who didn't know David Chaum's legacy would kind of know what you're talking about. It's
right. Yeah. So it's a very good name in that way, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's Electron Cash was like one of them. Electrum, like I think that was a Bitcoin Cash's Electrum wallet, and it's very well used. But then there's stiff competition, like obviously all those things. I don't know where this ranks in terms of stiffness. I mean, don't clip that and use that clip inappropriately. But as far as the cashew stuff, where those like semi-custodial show me on eCash mints that are popular or were popular, it's like the next Lightning Network on Bitcoin. Those are called eCash. It's like, oh, I'm saying eCash.
Right. The eCash, I think to me though, that's just more evidence of how generic the name is.
Yeah, and the thing is, and it's always one of those things. Like if you just called it Cash, like then I would be like, well, it's a great name, but you have to fight for it. You have to fight all the way uphill to get it. So
yeah.
When did you get the domain, by the way? When was that?
In the summer. It was, I think it was late summer. May have been. So it was only like, it wasn't that long ago. Maybe like September or something.
So I wonder why either the Bitcoin Maxis or the Bitcoin ABC eCash Bitcoin. I wonder why they didn't manage to get it. I wonder if it just wasn't a priority. Because I have to admit, the other eCash's domain, and I promise I'll stop talking about it pretty soon, is e.cash, which is
good.
It's a great one.
Yeah. It's funny, after I did eCash.com, I put out like the request to buy. I tried to buy that one. I honestly had no idea that this was Omri's project until like I just thought it was some random. You see what I mean? I honestly thought it was just some random guy was just like, oh, this is a really good name, and I'll just launch, like a random. I had no idea it was a serious project at all. But I still think if you're 160 on CoinMarketCap, like that's it. It's like that's like when you're in the hospital and they do like time of death or whatever. Like why go on with that? Like I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it really depends on like momentum and stuff. There have been quite a few that have been, I think Zcash, speaking of caches, was 200 something CoinMarketCap like a year or so ago, and then they got basically top 11 recently, like top 10, top 11. So like I don't know where they are now, probably top 18th or something. So it can happen, right? But it's like
I'm surprised that Zcash is would fallen so low. Like I know that it's not. It is weird because it has other things, it has like weird dev tax and whatever. But they were at least like they had like real like PhDs and stuff working there, and so they were at least something. So I was surprised that they would fall below like the Bitcoin SV level or whatever. This is just altcoin chat now, I guess. But
yes, of course.
you think like if you're below Bitcoin SV, then it's like, oh man, like
it depends on when of Bitcoin SV, because right now Bitcoin SV is 139th place, still too high in my estimation, and apologies to people who don't like that, but
I know there's a lot of people who are the SV believers, and they have some good points.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's tough.
Many cases like that in the space. The thing with like the last thing on comparing the various forks, I'm always gonna like no offense to people who find it funny, I am always going to think it's hilarious that that there's competing Bitcoin forks, like chain forks, with the
Yeah,
name
it's very
eCash.
bad for it splits the vote in a kind of in an analogy to democracy. It does make it really hard for anyone to compete against, the number one
Yes.
coin. So that's not good for the end user, because the end user deserves many strong competitors. But yeah, part of the drive chain idea, as you know, is that no matter what people's disagreement is in a technology sense, they can all be part of the same economic coin. So that's a part of it. But this could be like the XKCD thing, where it's like we have 15 competing standards or whatever. What we need is a new standard. Oh, now we have 16 or something. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it is funny that like it is creating a certain amount of creating a certain amount of controversy, which I guess is good. But the last thing on like because when you mentioned BSV, that reminded me of market cap, which market cap's a kind of weird arbitrary metric anyway. But one thing is so with the Bitcoin quantum threat, you have the whole Satoshi's coins, and I guess this is the first thing we'll probably go into after that. But
Sure.
there's a lot of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin was the very first. A lot of Bitcoin is known to be, and also suspected to be, kind of lost forever. Like it's just not accessible. Will never be. Dead people have it, etc. Probably much greater than other future projects. So like the actual circulating supply of the coins, in real terms, like the actual market cap would probably be lower if all those coins were, considered like not there. And if you start to then go down the list to like Bitcoin Cash, like what percentage of people have even claimed their Bitcoin Cash, or that actually have that? But again, it's said, like 20 million 20 million supply, and then of those, when you fork to BSV or to ABC eCash, right, that one, then the percentage of like actual coins that exist in circulation is much lower. But yet the market cap is like the market price of the current supply, but is sort of like multiplied to then 20 million, rather than, let's just, I don't know, throw out some random unfair number like 12 million or 20 million or 10 million that exists.
So you're saying that the Bitcoin Cash market cap is in reality lower than it appears on.
Yes, Bitcoin as well. But the further down the fork list you get, because every time you split, there's like
there's many people who are just like indifferent, and they
on that, like I think that BSV has a very I would say very, it's maybe just me hating, I don't know, but it seems like it might have a very inflated market cap ranking where it should be 300 and something instead. And maybe the same could be said of like ABC's ABC eCash.
I mean, I really think if you have to get to the second page, like how many cryptocurrencies can a normal person name? I mean, I'm not trying to say that what a normal person thinks is like how we should steer, but I do think, I would not, if I were running a cryptocurrency project and it was very low in the ranking, I would just be like, well, it's time for a conversation about do we think we can get, because I think you have to get to number one. Mm-hmm. You're either going to get to number one or you're just going to go to zero. So I would say I only want to be a part of something if I think it can go to number one.
Yeah, well,
I don't think if you're trapped below 100 for multiple years, then I would say that's a bad sign. You should start over.
Yeah, I would say for sure first page coin market cap is kind of like if you're trying to be a global financial system or a global platform, like one of these, like basically a Bitcoin or Ethereum competitor. If you're trying to be one of those, you should stay on page one probably. Again, this is a totally crappy arbitrary metric, but you should try to stay on there if you have any expectation of succeeding. Past that, though, if you're doing like very specific targeted use cases, like let's say NIM, right? The NIM VPN network that has a whole bunch of different mixed nets all over. They have their own coin and it's incentivized, or like Filecoin, which is big storage. Those kinds of things, if they're like third, fourth page, I don't really care. It's more of like a decentralized company than it is like the global financial system of the future,
I do, but of course the sidechain vision is that people do all this R&D and they figure out their little decentralized company thing, and then you plug all that into just one coin, and then one coin will eventually do it. It's kind of like we have USB now. It's like, oh, people can invent their own printer or something, but eventually we'll have it all standardized and interoperable, and then it will be very hard. It's very hard for, even if you invent the world's greatest printer or something, if it's not a USB cable and then someone else selling a USB printer, it's like very hard for you to survive, I think.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into some of the actual stuff. So I'm going to throw up the website, eCash.com again. It always goes full circle, right? Has the artifact activation thing. You have Vlad's interview thing here, and then I'm just a bunch of stuff like that. The why hard fork, FAQ, what to expect, reading, all this stuff. And so
I can't necessarily, not that it matters, but I can only see you. I can't see what you're doing. So that's fine. I'm just letting you know.
It's fine. As long as you know it's on your own site.
I do. I mean, I know what I put there. I don't know what the web browser is showing people.
Yeah, I see a buxom young lass on there. Where'd that come from? Just kidding. But so first of all, let's define what this is. It's a fork of BTC.
Right.
And what else is it? So I know what Bitcoin is today. I think everyone kind of knows what Bitcoin is today, other than maybe some small technical details of like who knows about Schnorr signatures or whatever. But is Bitcoin, what else? What's different from copy paste?
Well, I think, the impetus behind it is that we'll have a coin where we activate Drivechain, BIP 300, 301, and then we'll be able to try them out, these different L2s. These are merge mined L2 chains. These are what used to be called sidechains. And now we'll have a place to try those out. BTC is, very slow to adopt any soft fork upgrades, but there's more to it than that. It's just kind of like the culture of BTC is like very static at the moment, and kind of anyone who sticks their neck out to do anything doesn't get very far.
Yeah.
So even if they activated BIP 300 in BTC, that would not be enough. Like, there would need to be like a total cultural revolution, prioritizing these merge mined L2s. So like all that's probably like not going to happen, even though that would help a lot of the miners make more money and probably save a lot of them from bankruptcy. They're still not going to do it. And I'm not exactly sure why, but I think that's just a mistake.
On a technical level, then it's just Bitcoin plus BIP 300, and then that's it, right? There's no it's still SHA-256 mined,
right?
Like,
yeah, basically the L1 is exactly the same as Bitcoin Core, and even the BIP 300, 301, even that itself, I have a way of activating it without changing any lines of code in Bitcoin Core. You run like a second client next to it. This is the Core untouched soft fork. And so even to activate that, there won't actually be any change in. So even on a technical level, technical squared, it's basically Bitcoin Core is the L1. And the purpose of that is to say how everyone who loves Bitcoin Core, hey, you still have that over here. I do reduce the L1 block size.
Oh, so the block size is changed. That's the 1%. Yeah.
It's a very frivolous change, though, frankly, but it's lower. So now this is the smallest block of all the forks. This is the smallest block.
So what is it? 300 kilobytes? Is it
400? Yeah, because it's 4 megabytes. After SegWit, it's 4 megabytes on BTC, and so I cut it to 400 kilobytes,
including like the witness data, kind of like.
Yeah, I cut the whole them all by exactly.
Interesting. So the other change, I guess, that I wasn't really thinking or aware of, I guess, is on distribution, which goes to like the mention of like the Satoshi's coins thing.
Yes.
So I've only seen mostly.
I knew this would be controversial.
Yeah, I mostly just saw like angry accusations, and I didn't see the details. So I don't honestly know. So why don't you tell me? What do you plan on doing with Satoshi's coins or other people's coins who are being forked?
Yeah, the 1.1 million coins matching the so-called Satoshi pattern. These are early coins mined by Satoshi that have never been moved. We are reassigning some of them, end up being less than half, to the investors who support the project before the fork. So that is we're giving these coins to people who buy them now, basically.
Yeah. So, first of all, what is the thought process behind that? Like, yeah.
Well, there's quite a few things. So a lot of people think that this is like they sort of smell blood in the water, and they think, oh, this is like the weak part of this project. And they think, well, this is like a desperate move, and it violates property rights and all this stuff. I think really none of that is true, and actually, the whole Satoshi's coins part is not. It's not a weak point of the project at all, because the thing is, for 10 years. We put out a separate version of this project that does not mess with Satoshi's coins, and in fact, this second version of the project, it's not even a hard fork of Bitcoin, because the second version of the project is just BIP 300 itself. So we've already been giving away for free the one that's not a hard fork and the one that's not interfering with Satoshi's coins, and so people have to kind of. The implication is that if it weren't for this Satoshi's coins thing, then they would be supporters of the project. But you and I know that that's not remotely true at all.
I don't think that that's the primary. I think people,
Yeah.
if I were to guess, people who do not want to support the project are either Bitcoin maximalists who don't think this is not Bitcoin, therefore they're not interested, or they are, people in other cryptocurrencies that just don't see the reason why this one is better. But I don't think any of those people are going to be like, well, I was on board until I don't know how many.
Exactly.
To be clear, there might be some. There might be some who buy into the whole vision, but then are like, I don't like that part. Well, that's the addressing a why not kind of thing. But what about the why? Why do this? I mean, you could.
Yeah, why do it at all?
Yeah,
in part because
you could like take some coins that are tied to Roger Ver and just take some of them instead, but or just take none of them, or take the whole supply, or why?
Yeah, or we could have 22 million coins, or we could try to pre-mine some coins, or we could try to quickly mine some coins at the moment. There are a lot of possibilities. Mm-hmm. Well, one thing is I looked into the Satoshi research, and actually, at first I was a big skeptic, but then I was like, okay, actually, it's very convincing, that all these coins were mined by all these coins, including the first Bitcoin blocks. They were all mined by a special miner. Which means it was Satoshi who mined all these coins. Another thing is the coins have never moved, which suggests that they might be, they were not mined for the purpose of being spent. There's more evidence to suggest this in the Satoshi mining research. There's a special mine. The way the miner operated was after it found a block, it would wait for 5 minutes to see if give everyone else a chance. And then if no one else found a block, it would turn back on and it would mine super fast. And so this was clearly an attempt to keep the difficulty low. Mm-hmm. And it was also clearly an attempt to keep the network moving at 10-minute blocks, which makes it look more like just an altruistic act. And he wasn't even after the coins. He was just trying to keep the blockchain moving at a regular pace to process the transactions.
Now, does that imply that he doesn't have access to the coins, or he intended?
No, I think it maybe implies that he just didn't mine them in order to. It may also imply that he knows that they were all mined in a vulnerable way. So to take one of them might, they all might all be linked. Mm-hmm. There's more to it than that, though. I think the hard fork is very difficult to pull off. And I don't want, imagine if you have a pure hard fork that you announce is going to happen next year. There's no time pressure for people to get involved today. So why would anyone pay attention to it now? You need a reason to get resources and work done on the fork before it happens. Because really you have two options, which is one is you can try to work really hard on the fork. This is what Satoshi did. You can say you try to work really hard on your project, invest a bunch of time up front, and then finish it, and then bring it to the world. And this is what Satoshi did. And then, or you could say, well, here's the new hard fork. This is more a little bit more like what Bitcoin Cash did, where it was kind of like this fork, happened in August, and then in November it was kind of like everyone switched to it after the fact. You have to have like a mad scramble for it. Now, if you want to bring the Bitcoin community along, you kind of have to give them advance notice, I think. And you also want the project to be basically finished in advance. So, yeah, of course, what Satoshi did was he like altruistically put in all the work, then released the project, and then he altruistically mined for a while and then didn't touch the coins. And so that's obviously very impressive. But
I will say something about that standard of doing things. It sort of started a standard of this is the way you should do it because Satoshi did it. And I think I think it made sense for Satoshi starting things out, but it's entirely unrealistic as a standard. What I did notice in the early days is you had a lot of projects that were pretending to do this, right? They were pretending to be like, oh, we're going to be like Satoshi, and we're going to just not, we're going to do it all altruistically. But then you had things like, for example, I've heard some rumors through the grapevine that Charlie Lee intentionally built in an inflation bug so he could get some of the early coins on the day one of the Litecoin launch. I've heard there's some early projects like, I think Monero had a ninja mine where a crippled miner was released in the early days that was not publicly available, and the privately available miner mined way faster. People were just doing all these like underhanded ways of basically getting startup capital. Then you had things like Decred and Digibyte, which did have a pre-mine, but not much, like a small one, and to just get things started. And then you got onto like Ethereum with the first ICO. Zcash had startup capital from VCs, and they got the 20% of the block reward for the first few years in terms of the founder's reward. Now we're in full-on everything's VC unlock mode and stuff. So like you do need money to start projects, right? But there's transparent ways of doing it, and then there's not transparent ways of doing it,
I would add that I'm not actually comfortable with what Satoshi did, in fact, even though it was very generous of him. I've benefited enormously as a result of him inventing Bitcoin. And the idea that the official plan is that he has to altruistically sacrifice so much time and money. I actually don't, I'm actually not very comfortable with that. And I'm a little more comfortable with, like, for example, when they give like Elon Musk huge performance pay or something like that. I think that's a little bit more where you think, well, okay, if it's a good job, then everyone benefits and you have some incentive alignment. So I think anything that relies on altruism has the downside that it's going to, punish the people who are the most altruistically act in the most altruistic way. So I think that's actually kind of perverse, I think. I don't think that's a great idea. So yeah, there has to be some source of funding, and you really want the people who help you earliest to have a disproportionate payoff if the project is ultimately a success. And so that was part of why I do it in the first place, is an intentional choice to try to, who we can get some people who have skin in the game so that by the time the fork happens, there will be a whole new coalition of users. I have to add that it's partially also to create controversy and trick people into talking about it. And it's also partially because, a lot of these people who are haters of this idea, who are going to say that they hate this steal Satoshi's coins phrase or whatever, but the point is, these people are going to, these people already hated Drivechain when it was a for free project on Bitcoin that was going to basically kill all altcoins, kill all shitcoins. It'd be like the super maximalist project. But they still hated it then. So these people already hate the project, and it's like you're sacrificing a chess piece that's like already been captured or something. You know what I mean? We're going to shift and make sure that instead we can kind of monetize their anger now, because now they'll be talking about it. They'll be shilling the project. No one will really know, like, do they actually have a thought about it? I mean, think about it like this. What a lot of these people are trying to say, and this is, I don't know how many people this is going to end up being, but the critics of this, which I knew this would be controversial, this Satoshi's coin reassignment concept. But what these people often are saying is two things at once. Whereas on one hand, they're saying this project is a terrible project. It's going to go to zero and it's completely worthless. And we went from a world where this project didn't exist to a world where a completely worthless project is now come into existence, worth 0. So it's going to start as 0 and it's going to be worth 0. And this is basically what these people are saying on one hand. But then on the other hand, they're saying, wait a minute. They're kind of representing Satoshi. They're sort of trying to speak on Satoshi's behalf, like as if they were his lawyer or something. And they're saying, wait a minute. That's Satoshi's valuable property that you're stealing. You know what I mean? So they have to equivocate on, do they think this is a good idea overall, like objectively? So when they say they care about Satoshi's coins, they're saying that they think the idea is actually very valuable, and I'm depriving Satoshi of an extremely valuable piece of property. So I tricked them into shilling the idea indirectly. I'm not sure how many of them will consciously realize that, but I think there is a subconscious. I think some people are kind of grapple with the fact that, can you steal something that you didn't even know existed like 1 hour ago?
I mean,
and I think some people are going to grapple with that.
But if it's none claimed by Satoshi, then it probably doesn't belong to him. If this happened on the BTC chain, then that would be awful, right? That would be very clear.
Right, that's the thing. Is this is not BTC, so nothing can take
either
Satoshi's
theft
coins.
or squatting, like theft or collection of it, or grave robbing, one or the other. But in this case,
it's a new thing.
So here's a funny fact to think about, by the way. What if this whole fork launches, everything's fine, but then a month later, the remainder of Satoshi's coins get moved?
That would be really bizarre.
Yes,
yeah, that would make me concerned.
So if that happened, and this person proved that they were Satoshi Nakamoto and claimed those coins, and then they wanted it back, they said, "Whatever you haven't spent, can you just give it to me, please? There's my coins."
I
Do you think you would give them back to him?
Have to. I think. Well, because I think. Actually, the premise I'm working off of is that Satoshi has indirectly consented to the transaction in a way. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people won't accept that.
It's like a speak now or forever hold your peace.
Because I'm trying to say something like, either it's possible to improve Bitcoin so substantially that we flip it and become the #1 coin, which again, I don't think is likely, but I think is something like 10% possible. Mm-hmm. So I think, I'm starting to get a little. This is what we could talk about: is like why do we need a hedge against BTC failing? I mean, you and I know, but a lot of the BTC maximalists will be thinking like, well, isn't it already perfect and it's immortal and it will never go down and blah blah blah. So I'm personally getting a little nervous, and I think that we need like a hedge against failure of BTC, which is why I'm creating this. Now, if it pays off and I'm right, then all that will mean is that the project, the BTC project, was vulnerable to replacement this whole time, and it's like kind of lucky that I replaced it, and it's this and not something else, and he still has half of his coins. So I'm kind of telling Satoshi, like, listen, for a 50% cut, I'll sell you this option where you can only benefit. Either this project is a total failure and nothing happens to you, it's free, or if I save your 1.1 million coins, we get half. So yeah, it's really like kind of a Pareto improvement if you think about it. But I don't expect the Twitter mob is just the Twitter mob, and the extent to which they talk about the project, they are actually affirming that it has value.
Yes, or at least it's valuable to it. Either it has value or has threatening capabilities for whatever reason. And
if everything were fine in BTC, sorry to interrupt, but just if everything were super fine in BTC, then this project would have a 0% chance of succeeding, and there'd be no reason to talk about, be no reason for people to weigh in on it, but we all know they probably will. They will talk about it.
It probably, if this had a 95% chance of succeeding, there also would be very little controversy. But it's just the fact that it's there, but it's like, and that's one of those things with, like, I think, not to go back on the eCash name, which, by the way, if you had to fight it out for it, who's going to be eCash and who's going to be eCash Cash? Because
yeah, that'd be funny, of course. Yeah,
so
I don't think part of the reason why I'm doing this eCash thing was because I didn't want to put Bitcoin in the name. I thought about putting like Bitcoin Arena or Bitcoin Drivechain or something weird like that, but I think it's bad to fight over the brand. So I didn't want to take. I thought when I was naming it eCash that I wasn't even. But I mean, this is why I say I think it makes the eCash people look even worse, because I'm telling you the truth is that I really looked. And I thought, I made an honest attempt to see, like, what is this? And I just thought, oh, this is just some 160 market cap nothing coin. and I didn't even know. And I'm like a leading expert on Bitcoin, and I had no idea that I knew that Omri did ABC, and I had no idea that it was, So I mean, I'm just saying, like, I'm not saying that automatically means that they have no chance, but I think like that's going to be really tough. So I feel bad. I do feel bad about that, but I think like, yeah, that's not. Speaks to the market. Coin market cap is cause and effect. Unfortunately.
And the thing is, to me, it's just funny to me that it was accident, and it is funny that I don't know where the market caps of both coins are going to be in the next few, whenever this thing launches,
right?
Or 6 months from now. I don't know. I just think I have to say, because I know a lot of eCashers, and I don't have a problem with them. They seem like nice people. The tech of the chain seems decent. I just think they're going to have to deal with the fact that I think it's very, very funny in an absurdist way that it's like God's playing tricks on us through these coincidences to make a funny. It's a funny situation. It just makes me laugh. So Thank you guys for making me laugh. So we got this split. So I think one of those concerns, and I think Jonathan Silverblood, I don't know if you heard, it was a Bitcoin Cash guy. I think I saw him post some sort of objection to the Satoshi repo, so to speak, basically saying if they can decide to repossess those coins, they could do anyone's coins. And so let's just take that as a question, I guess. Why? So first of all, it's not a repossession because it's not a possession to begin with, but it seems like most forks that I've seen just seem to copy paste the whole supply over with ease in the whole what should you call it, the distribution. They copy and paste the distribution.
The UTXO set, perhaps.
Yeah, just it goes right over. There were a few forks where this didn't happen, and so one of them was, I don't know if you remember Steam from back in the day, but
I do.
When Justin Sun bought Steemit, the main website, and just tried to take over the chain, and basically they had a chain split at that point into Hive, which is the surviving fork, it would be like if Bitcoin died and Bitcoin Cash was the only one that's still around, kind of thing. But as part of that, the reason when they split is because they had a delegated proof of stake system, so they couldn't have a sovereign chain by having Justin Sun still have the same coins. So they took his coins, again, the attacker coins, and they turned them into a DAO that would be paid for development stuff like that. But it was like a survival necessity to repo those coins. So what about this decision of you're repoing some of them, but then why still the rest of the coins? Why not all of Satoshi's coins? And also, why not just all the coins? Literally the entire supply, and then just give them away with a faucet or pre-sale? Why keep some of the existing 95% or 99% of the existing UTXO distribution, but only in this one case sort of break that rule?
Well, I do agree that it's sort of once you take one coin, you have kind of crossed the line to some extent. But I don't think it's to that much of an extent. Can't you just say that you're going to do something just because you think it's a good, you weighed all the considerations and you had to make a judgment call and you just stand by it? Why does everything have to be aren't there other options other than if you take half of Satoshi's coins, then you can take any coins, you can take no coins, or it's I don't see why it has to be all or nothing. What we're doing is producing open source software and giving it away for free. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very good. In fact, I think it's some of the best open source software out there. So, it's what we've produced is much better than the Lightning Network. It's much better than living in a world of altcoins. So having a Zcash based L2 Drivechain is just better than having Zcash itself. We have EVM, but I discontinued it because it wasn't that interesting, but we could turn it back on. We have an EVM, Ethereum L2. So we built a bunch of stuff that is the best in the world, and we're giving it away for free. And it can scale to 8 billion users and process all the transactions on Earth and collect transaction fees from them and give miners hundreds of billions of dollars a year in revenue. So we're doing all this stuff and giving it away for free. and just the way that anyone would be able to finance that in an honest way. Because I'm also not comfortable like going to the investors and saying, listen, if we do a really good job, you won't get any more ROI than that. I really would prefer to go to investors and say, listen, here's the project. If we do a really good job, you'll make a lot of money. But if we do a terrible job, then the project will suck, and you'll lose your money. So, we'll at the end of the day, we're going to produce all this stuff that's open source that even BTC could use for free if it wanted to. Sorry?
They probably should use.
They probably should use, right, exactly. So we're going to have to, but they won't. And so we're going to have to deal with the defective culture of BTC. And that's why the hard fork exists at all. Is because the BTC culture is deranged.
Yeah, well, let's talk practically about that. So when we last talked a couple of years ago or something like that, the idea was to launch this as a soft fork on Bitcoin and launch Drivechains, I should say,
Right.
and then go from there. And what was the barrier to making that happen? Like, so first of all, for a soft fork, what percentage of the hash rate would you have needed to have it like not split off to a different fork to actually?
No, yeah, 51% hash rate can activate any soft fork. And I invented this thing, QSIF, the Core Untouched soft fork. So it doesn't even have to go through Bitcoin Core. But the problem is that it's not just about whether or not you activate an opcode. That's really, that would be like saying, if we just need to do, all we need to do is pass a law, like lowering the speed limit on the highway. You know what I mean? It's the real thing is in people's minds. That's the real substance, is the culture. And so, on a highway, people just speed, and there are certain highways and there's certain highway intersections where like one highway is kind of, have you ever had this happen? One highway is like the slow highway, but then as soon as everyone gets onto a different one, it's like off to the races, it's like, but they're both like 3-lane. Sometimes people speed, and sometimes people speed a lot, and sometimes people speed only a little. And it just speaks to the culture. Like if you go to a different, it's try littering, and people don't really litter in like Colorado or Japan, but then in New Jersey or whatever, people litter. So that it would be like saying we got the opcode, but that's not really about it. We should live in a world where all the Bitcoiners are very excited to activate BIP300 because they know it's a completely safe, opt-in, reversible soft fork, and they know that it will let them get, something that's much better than the Lightning Network, which is a large block optional L2 drive chain. And they know it will let them get Zcash privacy. And they know it will let them take all these altcoins and all this PhD research that everyone else has been doing and just take it and say, we have all this stuff. And it will bring back competition among developers and, so that there's no developer capture problem. And so it's like, okay, well, no matter what our developers do, it doesn't matter because now we have like 2 or 3 different competing L2s that are competing for our money. And there would be like Vitalik would be running like a rootstock drive chain, and it would be like EVM, and Roger Ver would be running like a large block L2 of Bitcoin. Everyone would be in the same. So people should be like, champing at the bit. They should be like screaming and cheering that they can't possibly wait any longer. And the miners as well, they should be saying like, we can't wait to collect the merge mine transaction fees from all these chains. But everyone should be like, beating a path to get to this as quickly as possible. And even the developers could be like, listen, we can't review all this code. We got to push this stuff into L2s. This is what they used to say about the Lightning Network. They said, we don't want to be responsible for all this stuff. We just want to make a simple change on L1 where all it is basically SPV plus counting to 13,000. And we're just going to use this op-nop5. And we'll just ship this one chain out the door. And then whenever people come to us and say, oh, what about CTV? What about TX hash? What about great, whatever, blah, blah, blah. What about quantum? We can just tell them, good, to go do it on an L2 first. And then see how that works out. And then maybe come back. So everyone should be literally trying as hard as possible to get BIP300 activated on BTC in a sort of a sane world. But you see, so it's not really about like, it's just the culture just isn't there. which I accept. And that's the other reason about why are people criticizing this project. It makes no sense because I'm just accepting that they're sort of like, they don't want it on BTC. They don't want, you can't do it somewhere else. So these are the irrationalities that I think on a subconscious level, people will pick up on, which is why more people will probably be talking about this idea in the future.
Well, so was there just not a lot of positive response for Bitcoin? Because
no, I think individually. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, because if you look at it, like Bitcoin has undergone a series of changes since 2016, 17, whenever, where SegWit was highly controversial with in some camps, but then that got added, and then was it Taproot got added, a few other little things got added here and there, and it didn't seem like there's much controversy around those things that happened. And of course, the Bitcoin Knots world, right, seems to say that it's basically like the core developers, the tinkering that gets into the roadmap and gets implemented. And so it's not like, I think that something like Drivechains is not infeasible from like a technical scope or risk, or it's not like, wow, this is so much different from the things that have been done. People have done these changes, done things like op return, ending the op return limits for an individual transaction, things to make way for like SegWit and things were like to prepare for Lightning allegedly, and then Taproot and stuff like that, and then the insinuation was that the op return limit being removed was to prepare for Citrea, and so there's a bunch of very similar things like that have happened. So what is the key difference in why BIP 300 you didn't see it as viable to, like, it didn't have the support to be a viable soft fork to Bitcoin?
Well, first of all, of course, SegWit was very controversial. I mean, as you know, and it had to activate in like this weird way. And then I think Taproot was kind of like a weird echo of that, where it was a reshadow, maybe is a better word, where miners realized that they had been blamed for how slow SegWit activated, so they kind of rushed to activate Taproot. Since then, we've had nothing. So there's been a huge slowdown. Like in the first 7 years of Bitcoin, there were something like 14 different soft forks. They were every 6 months. Not with that regularity, but there were a lot of. That's the rate, the average rate. And then with SegWit, it took 20 months from when it was first proposed to when it finally activated on the network. And then with Taproot, it took 46 months from when it was proposed to when it finally activated on the network. And since then, there hasn't been anything that is activated. And there have been many attempts by other people to activate. So Jeremy Rubin tried to activate CTV. He gave up after less than a day.
Wow, that's brutal.
Right, you should have him on, and it's an interesting story. And then there was I think OpCat is actually the smoking gun. That proves that it's the culture is defective and the process is defective. But I mean, there's plenty of other things to say. So before I get to OpCat, Peter Wheeler, he was like he prepared Taproot, but then he said like he had made these numerous comments here and there that he was too emotionally exhausted to discuss the activation of it because it was too contentious. Yeah, I know. It's funny you laugh at that because I actually also was laughing at it. Like I was thinking to myself, I don't remember when.
But it's funny too.
It is sad, but I was also it's sad in several ways. Where it's like, okay, first of all, the emotional oppression is very strong, and so that is real. But then I was thinking, I think this was like last year or something. I was thinking I was sort of thinking on that and chuckling to myself, and I was like, there's a real war going on in Ukraine, and like people. 18-year-old kids are getting like blown up and like losing limbs and dying and stuff. And I was like, but Peter can't like, I was kind of, this is kind of a little bit of a joke, but I'm not, because I understand exactly where Peter's coming from. But I was kind of thinking like, the horror of it all. Like my job is so hard. I have to deal with activation.
That reminds me of a Chris Rock joke from back in the day where he talked about Nelson Mandela spending so much time in prison in horrible conditions, making it through. And then he was within like something like 6 months of being out, he got divorced, where he was just like, he could handle all that stuff, but within 6 months, he's like, I can't take this anymore. This is worse than prison. And he did that. So it kind of, I mean, obviously.
Yeah, it's the real prison.
having like dealt with, I mean, I've been in stuck my nose in a few different crypto governance wars, and it can be taxing. I don't know about like having your house bomb type stuff, but it is it is a pain. I understand being like,
yeah,
especially
and who
because,
needs it if you can do without it, then why not do without it? So I understand.
yeah,
But this is just because for those who don't know, he's like an extremely respected, high status, like technical person. He's a very nice person. So it's
And
kind of
no
like the
one
idea
dislikes
that's very demoralizing that he's like a sort of leader.
even the
And-
big
and-
blockers like don't really say much bad about it. They disagree with some of his
Right.
work, but they
And
don't.
he's like a very polite kind of guy too. So
Everyone knows
but then
he's
it's
smart.
kind of like this is the thing with the bitter comes the sweet. If you're
Mm-hmm.
going to be Mr. Nice, polite guy, then it's like you're participating in nothing getting done. So I don't know. I'm not trying to. I'm just throwing it out there for the audience to think about.
Yeah,
But so
so-
Opcat is unless you have something really important. to say.
No, okay, go to that side in the same vein.
So Opcat is like it's like 13 lines of code. All it does is take X and Y and returns XY. You know, it really doesn't do that much. It was in the original version of Bitcoin for a long time.
I mean, in BSV,
At some point, yeah, I mean, 2009, 2010.
which by the way,
it was
in the YouTube live chat here, there was a joke about what do we call this Bitcoin fork about Bitcoin Sztorc's vision, the new Bitcoin.
yeah,
SV.
that's
then
funny.
you get to
I like that. I
then
didn't
you
think
get to-
funny. I like.
then you get to be also BSV and compete
That would
with
be
another
funny.
one that's in there.
It's like eCash Sztorc's vision. We do eCash SV. I'll do like that'll be my next
But
project.
you have to do
right?
next one should be BSV, Bitcoin Sztorc's vision.
Is there any way of making it even funnier? Like, is there other than the different B word? Like, I don't know. We'll think of something funny for that.
Bcash,
Bytecoin.
Bcash,
Yeah, Bcash Sztorc is that's funny. Bcash Sztorc is. I mean,
vision.
at a certain point,
Someone,
he's a really,
listen, some online troll. I'm going to have to call it that
they're gonna make it already,
preemptively
yeah.
because a troll will do it otherwise.
yeah. That's if someone's already registering the domain, probably.
Yes.
But yeah, it's some of these are such like only these are like inside jokes at this point.
Of
No one
course,
even knows, like,
but
what's
they're
going
very
on.
good. So, so Opcat basically just got completely stonewalled. What does that look
Yeah.
like, by the way? Like
Opcat is very, very, very tame, and a lot of people thought it's also very useful, and it's also again, it's one of these op-nop opcodes, so it's very, very easy to just say, like if you say we're going to use opnop 6 as opcat, you can very easily later ship a version that just says never use opnop 6 again, and this effectively turns it off and restores the original operation of the network pre-activation. So these are all like opt-in, ignorable, reversible, and it's kind of just like, what on earth more do people want, you know? But then on top of that, there was like people like Udi tweeting. I believe this was at the beginning of 2024. Someone can look this up and find exactly what it is. But it was something like, he said something like, well, when Opcat activates later this year with no controversy, he's like, I'll be accepting everyone's apology or something like that. I probably butchered the quote. But basically, the point of the quote is, he's very confident that it would have activated by the end of some year.
Yeah.
I think it might have even been 2023. I think it was 2024.
And
but
narrator, he did not, in fact, accept anyone's apology.
yeah, exactly. And it did not activate. And the question is why? And I think the answer is everyone, you know, there's courage is in very short supply. Everyone, whenever you propose an idea, everyone kind of is vaguely aware of the fact that no ideas have gotten through, and people are sort of nervous about, like, what will other people think if I get on board with this? So actually, it's this weird kind of stigma for proposing anything new, even something like Opcat, which effectively does almost nothing. And I think, again, the smoking gun is also this op return drama, because the op return drama does effectively almost nothing. Because what Luke Dash Jr.'s position is that he's okay with certain images being in the blockchain, but he's not okay with them being on a tiny portion of the mempools that, you know, are not receiving transactions and are not actually generating blocks. So these are like dead-end mempool, dead-end nodes and dead-end mempools that these images would be in temporarily. But he's fine with them being in the blockchain. And this is like a complete waste of time for anyone to talk about this at all. But we've been talking about it for 2 years, and it's just all a big waste of time.
Yeah, and I
this
will
is how
agree with
low
that
we've fallen. And
I will
so,
agree with that on Luke's thing, because Luke, so BIP, what was it, BIP 100ers, or that's what they're called?
110, I think you're
110ers,
referring to.
whatever it is now. I've sort of have a side eye on that. I even called it Bitcoin's caveman war because of just how much like, Neanderthal thinking seemed to go into it. That group does have a lot of the same, like a lot of the freedom money kind of virtue signals that appeal to someone like me. But in terms of that with the core versus knots debate type thing, I kind of like emotionally went with the knots people and intellectually went with the core people more than the other. But it was
No, that's a very good mix because the knots
really
people
crazy.
are correct. The knots people are correct about a lot of things. They just, unfortunately, they picked this op return issue, which is a total losing issue. I don't know why they picked this issue, but they could have, if they just wanted to say the core is corrupt and that there's no accountability and there's no oversight and there's no way, all that is perfectly true.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about like practical things, right? We're talking about social consensus here. So, but in terms of practical, how do you get into the chain? Is you get enough miners to basically run it. Now, what's that process like? It seems like because there's not enough social consensus, you didn't feel confident in getting miner support. Is there any kind of an avenue to go directly to mining pools and things and say, look, activate this, it'll be worth it, and just try to lobby miners to just do this? Or do you think miners, which is kind of 2017 era Bitcoin politics, right? But like, or is it
Right.
in 2026 now, miners are just super reactive to things. They're not going to run something without broad consensus, whatever that means.
That's certainly the case, which is that a lot of them are worried about things like optics or whatever. I think many of them will be going bankrupt because of their preoccupation with this. I've been saying this for many years. I think I've been right the entire time. But yeah, I think there's a couple facets to it. One is the end miner. So there's a lot of, when we say miner, we talk about like one word, but actually there's many different things. So like there's the end of the day, there's someone who owns an ASIC and they plug it into their data center, and they may have spent millions of dollars, and they spend all this money on electricity and cooling and whatnot. That person is a miner, and to those people, they don't know that much about Bitcoin actually, and they may not even be Bitcoiners because they just point at the pool pays them, they sell, and they have to finance all this electricity and whatnot. The other thing that's recently happened over the last 2 or 3 years is now, ever since large language models, those people have an out. So those people, the end hasher, the ASIC owner, they can pivot to whatever, like they can pivot to AI data center or something. And and even the people who manufacture the ASIC chips, they have a very specialized investment. But of course they could, I don't know the details on this. We'd have to get someone who's like a world expert in chip fabrication to tell us this. But I'm pretty sure, they're trying really hard to design the next generation of ASIC chip year after year after year after year. I'm pretty sure they can put those skills towards just designing some other chip and producing some other chip. So there's some expertise that builds up, but then there's some just general expertise. So these people actually have outs, you know what I mean? They can actually cut and run pretty easily. Not many of them are particularly loyal to the Bitcoin like software or the Bitcoin product even. So we're also in a situation where if they do something that's good for Bitcoin, even if they do something that's good for transaction fees and the Bitcoin price, ultimately, in the long run, the difficulty will adjust upwards and cancel that out. So they have actually a very limited ability to care about improving Bitcoin. Whereas, in contrast, if you're someone who owns Bitcoin, you really need it to be BTC that goes up or down, and you really need it to be the Bitcoin software. So now, if we turn our attention to the pools also have some weird conflicts of interest where a lot of these are very bizarre, and I think people would be surprised to learn just how screwed up and weird this situation is. But to activate a soft fork, you need 51% of the hash rate, and that means you need a lot of pools involved. Now, you need this creates these like veto points where you need a lot of pools involved. Each pool will be thinking to themselves, well, listen, who do I mostly compete against is the other pools. It's like, Foundry's competing against Antpool or whatever. So if like they have a very limited incentive to do something that's good for the whole network overall, actually. I'm not saying that this is a very strong effect, but it is something that people should keep in mind. Like why would, what they're thinking about is how can I do something at my pool that causes people to leave, Ant Pool or something and come into my pool. And something like a common project like the soft fork doesn't fit into that. But interestingly, the pools, I think, don't have as much of an out, where like if you're a Bitcoin mining pool, it's not like you can pivot to AI or something. So I think they may eventually discover, I don't know how late in the game it will be, but they may discover that the soft forks were in their best interests all along. And having but then of course you have people like Saylor and stuff who are like the soft ossificationists, or at least they think they're ossificationists. I think they don't really know what they're doing, because of course Bitcoin Core keeps putting out new versions every 6 months anyway, like despite what they do. But yeah, a lot of people think like we don't want this, maybe changes how we'd have to describe Bitcoin or something. So a lot of people just ultimately don't want it. And I don't want to be in the business of giving people something that they don't want. I respect consent the same as any reasonable person. So it's kind of like there's all these people out there who either individually want it, but they're worried about what other people think, or they, but yeah, so that leaves me in the position that I'm in, where many people, including, Adam Back and whatever, all these people at the layer2labs.com/friends list, you can check all these people. A lot of these people think like, well, this is at its core, this is a good idea or an idea worth trying. But yet it's not on BTC. So then how to actually bring it into the world in a way that actually rewards all Bitcoiners by giving them free money. And you can see that, of course, by doing this basically perfect idea in a perfect way, being selflessly giving everyone free money, that you can see where all the criticism comes from.
Yeah. Well, so one last stop on the whole, like the thought process of like, if this, then that, of like, let's try to fix Bitcoin. That didn't work. What next kind of thing, is how easily could Drivechains or something very similar to Drivechains be like a merge mined sidechain with Bitcoin bridged to it, be created without having even a soft fork change to Bitcoin itself? Like, is it possible?
Again, I've already done that, because the QSIF BIP300 activator, this already would activate the soft fork without changing any lines of code in Bitcoin. But it's kind of nonsensical.
51% of the hash rate. That's
but it's kind of nonsensical because the idea of Drivechain is that they're merge mined L2s, like kind of governed by the mining process anyway. So the idea that you wouldn't have, like, what I mean, that would indicate that something else had gone wrong, like in the logic or people's understanding of it. Like that would be really strange. So even if it were possible, it would just be like it's like saying, could you drive a car if you didn't have to go anywhere? And you would just be like, well, I don't know. I'm sure you know what you're trying to do. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's more than just like activate this. It's the whole culture is just like people don't even want. I don't think people. It's just about what the culture wants. So I think various people have learned that at different times.
Well, so the culture obviously has a lot wrong with it. And that being said, there are I kind of feel like Lightning had broad consensus appeal amongst remaining, again, after the Bitcoin Cash split, at least the remainder of Bitcoiners had broad support for Lightning to at least exist, and therefore it existed. Every other Bitcoin L2, I would not say that of. And of course, you have things like rootstock, you have stacks, whatever you call that. And again, the definitions get weird. So you have Citrea, which again, no one said anything, no one campaigned for it. It just sort of happened. Then of course you have the eCash stuff, or again, the cache.
Yeah, I know what you mean. You're talking about this is another thing that eCash is used for, this weird custodial Lightning Chaumian.
Yeah, so you have all there's something called wasn't Light Spark, it was Light something or other, that's like a new hybrid L2 that's helps Lightning. I don't know, there's a bunch of crap.
I think it's like a state, isn't it, one of the state chain ideas?
Something like that.
I may be wrong about that.
But the point is, all these things were launched as Bitcoin L2s or sidechains or whatever without, I guess, direct consent of the protocol. And so is there anything technically, again, forgive me for not being super into the sidechain-nomics or the technicals of that, but is there anything preventing you from launching Drivechains as an L2, as a sidechain, without having to actually modify the Bitcoin core protocol at all, like without having to talk to a single miner, I guess?
Oh, well, that's different. Again, because we don't have to modify any lines of code, as I said, with the QSIF activator. But I don't know, because it's such a miner-centric idea, the drive chain, that I don't know if it, like, I'm not sure what that would mean without. And again, I don't know, like, if the culture doesn't want it, then how much, what are the transaction fees revenues going to be? Like, what is the usage going to be? You see what I mean? Like, it's not, it's kind of like it's very confused. It's like saying, could you open a grocery store in a town where everyone hated eating food or something?
So
it's like
if I were to distill that argument, it's kind of like saying, I want this for Bitcoin. If Bitcoin as a whole doesn't want it, there won't be enough money in it if I force it upon them anyway.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
You can't force
people
do something where I do have money to work on it.
Yeah, basically, yes. And it would be a good demo. This would be a demonstration of what it does.
Yeah,
and
it's gonna be fun. I heard rumor at one point about Drivechains on Litecoin, though, and
yeah, I'm still in favor of that. I'm in favor of that, and I will help them do that. But they had some weird stuff. I'm not sure they totally understood, like, why the QSIF activator is so much better, and it's less work for them. And all they have to do is run it next to Litecoin. And all the stuff, all the L2s, which is most of the work, is on the L2s. It's not really on BIP 300. It's not that complicated. It's a little complicated, but it's not that complicated. Litecoin can do, like, if they were to run the activator, then they would automatically have access to, like, all of these L2s. The question then is, like, are they going to run, like, our wallet, and are they going to run, like, our front end graphical user interface software? Like, how much of a revolution is it going to be? And if it's not, then how are they going to, like, cut and paste? Like, are they going to take the graphical user interface elements that govern the sidechains? Are they going to take those and, like, paste them into their favorite Litecoin full node software? Like, I'm not sure exactly to what extent is it, like, just a wholesale revolution, like the Paul Sztorc, like, capture of Litecoin or something. But yeah. It's all open source, and I'm sure with LLMs and stuff, they could splice all that stuff together, and it wouldn't be that hard. I'm in favor of that. At the time, they were saying, oh, we should activate it, like, with BIP 8 or something. I was very confused by that, and I was like, oh, I don't think they really understand what. But I still think that's a good idea. I still think we should do it on Litecoin. I still think we should do it on testnet 4 even. But I'm just not sure, like, what the appetite is or what the understanding. You can see how low the levels of understanding are about, like, if people don't understand the vision, then they're useless people. Not as people per se, but that's kind of like they just don't understand it.
They're useless as people. You should not be a person.
Yeah, not qua. They're not useless qua people, but they're useless, like, in the terms of context of the conversation about, like, what we should be doing. It's kind of just like, well, what are we? So that's the thing. It's just like, it's just kind of confusing. And then, so the premise is, like, all these people are like, oh, I would have supported Drivechain except for whatever, Satoshi's coins, or except for the hard fork or something like that. And then people say, oh, this is a hard fork is what they say. The reason the hard fork is bad is because you're tricking the Bitcoin community into getting involved. It's like giving every single Bitcoin owner the coins. I mean, it's not really a trick. It's like, it's kind of the real thing in a way. So, there's some people that you can't please. Usually I'm like 10, 15 years ahead. I mean, I was really 10, 15 years ahead on the prediction markets topic. And so I'm very much ahead of the game. And usually I do things that I know will be unpopular just because of the way they're perceived. And that's not my responsibility. That's other people's, foolishness and being right. But I'm certainly willing to put up with it to some extent. But yeah, so I don't know. Do we have any? Well, yeah, that's. I wanted to correct one other thing you said about a lot of the L2s activate without any assistance from Bitcoin, but that's not true of the Lightning Network. The Lightning Network, of course, had SegWit, which you asked for, that's and that derailed everything for years. And as a result, Lightning is the opposite of Drivechain, in which it has broad cultural support. But this has been a total disaster, and this is probably will be what will kill the Bitcoin project, is people's faith in Lightning, since it basically doesn't work, and people are determined. They become more deranged the more they get involved with it. They become determined to lie about it, and so unfortunately, the cultural support is a double-edged sword. If you have too much of it, it becomes just a weird cult, and then if you have not enough, then you can't get anything done with that group of people.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you have, now that we have this sort of like Bitcoin has been slowly imploding on itself very slowly, I would say, over the last decade. But it's still kind of like the culture is ossifying. The inmates are restless, all this kind of stuff. And now I'm interviewed Peter Eisen of Bitcoin Unlimited on his scaling research and stuff. He's also involved with the Nexa project. And as far as I'm aware, Nexa, I don't think it's like a fork of Bitcoin Cash, but it's a new crypto that is similar-ish to Bitcoin Cash with like more VM stuff and like whatever the rest. The reasoning for that is, well, when we split off with Bitcoin Cash with Bitcoin Core, we kept things like exactly the same, other than we modified the block size and then some other stuff. But like, if we don't have to try to be Bitcoin, then we're sort of free to do more different things, right? To change more things that would be a smart decision, but then, you know, we just couldn't get going on Bitcoin. Or if we did that on Bitcoin Cash, it wouldn't be Bitcoin Cash. It wouldn't be a Bitcoin anymore or whatever. And so a lot, to my mind at least, a lot of the drive chain design I've always said that the drive chains seem to be the most elegant solution for Bitcoin, in that it pleased all sides. It kept things exactly the same, basically, and it kept the small block vision, run your own node, kept the big block vision if you want. It gave everyone what they wanted in a Bitcoin context. Now that we're out of a Bitcoin context, why does this model make sense? Like, why wouldn't you just have a bunch of different chains that you don't have a small block kind of base chain? You just only have like the ZK chain and the other chain and all those ones together. Like, why is this exact design the way it is kind of makes sense for what is now a non-Bitcoin cryptocurrency?
Well, you have to have an L1, so you have to have L1 node software. So the question is that it's either going to be exactly the same as Bitcoin, or it's not going to be that. Mm-hmm. And every change, I think, the Bitcoin Core full node, I think, is an extremely battle-tested piece of software. People have been trying to hack it, et cetera, for years. And so I think you'd be crazy to turn that down. And you would just say, if you didn't have to, like, why rewrite it all from scratch? Because every change you make is, first of all, something you're going to have to write. You're going to have to come up with. You're going to have to test it yourself. You're going to have to maintain it. And then you're going to have to, not only that, even if it's a good change, now you have to explain it to other people, who will then have to and justify it to other people, and they're going to have to explain it and justify it to other people also. So you have this enormous problem for each change. And of course, in software, like one single line of code or something could be like the keylogger, or it could be like crashing the software or something. So I think, whatever you do, you have to have L1 node software. And so I think you might as well just take what is the most widely adopted full node software for use in, like cryptocurrency, block validation. So that's why I think the L1 should be the L1. For a lot of the L2s, like a lot of them we wrote from scratch. Sorry?
So you will be backporting as things go along. Like if there's
including all the mistakes. I think that Bitcoin Core has made many mistakes and still is, but we'll just keep keeping that, because the idea is, if you like Bitcoin Core, then you can come over here and you'll still have that. So the idea is still trying to please everyone. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can see, of course, it's not going to work, but I think it shines a way. It shines a light on who are the people who are not pleased by this. I think it shows like that they have like weird, unmeetable standards, or that they just don't know what they're, or they get their information from they get their all information from some weird echo chamber that is not truth oriented. And so I think it's only a matter of time before a community like that collapses one way or another. So we might as well shine a light on it while we still can and figure out, okay, who's like unhappy about this and why? Like, who's unhappy about you getting free money as a Bitcoiner? What are they going to lose? How humiliating is it going to be for them if this idea succeeds?
Yeah, of course. Now, so we've kind of gone through the logical progression of not only what is this, but why we couldn't put it in Bitcoin through a bunch of different avenues, and why does it look the way it is right now? Like, that makes sense now. So now you kind of hinted at some end game type things, but like, how do you expect this to go now? So the fork launches, some people get their coins, you get Satoshi's coins, some of them, people get, outraged for reasons we've already covered, whatever. Things chug on. There are some drive chains that are launched now and people start doing things. First, what are the first drive chains? I'm sure you must have a couple that are going to be ready to like launch almost like at launch, right?
Right. Yeah, the starter pack, so to speak. I think the bread and butter will be the scaling and privacy. So there's one I call Thunder, which is kind of a lightning joke. And there's another one I call Z-Side. I use the same orchard crate as Zcash, the altcoin.
Yeah. Was there ever a thought? So here's the thing. Let's say you have like a million drive chains, right? You could have like the fast one. You could have the private one. You could have whatever. What thought has been given to combining a couple of those use cases to have fewer drive chains? Like, so for example, why couldn't you have Thunder be Z Thunder, for example, like both of those together sort of thing?
It's a very good question. And I think it's an open, like, I don't know if people will prefer, because you get some advantages when you say, we're going to have the full node do a bunch of stuff, like calculate a bunch of state or track some different like sets of things. So you have some advantage by making them special purpose, where you say like this is the identity sidechain, this is the assets sidechain, so, or this is the privacy sidechain. So you gain some technical edge by doing that. And but at the same time, it might just be that people disagree over how much, basically the block size, like what the full node resource requirements should be. So maybe some people only want to pay a little bit to store a small blockchain. Other people are willing to pay more, and a smaller number of people are willing to pay like a huge amount. And maybe they'll just divide that way. I don't know, but I just kind of like, it's just a little bit easier to just ship them this way and kind of give them each a little bit of a branded type of thing.
So now, from what I remember from the last, I mean, I guess you could probably reiterate in case people didn't watch the last show again. I don't assume everyone watching has watched everything, but the way you get from the main chain, right, from the main Bitcoin core, whatever thing, the bridging process does take a certain amount of blocks, etc. And it has
going in is instant. Going back is very slow.
And so, how many blocks does that take?
So to come back, it's extremely slow. But the idea is that most people would not use that. But it is 3 to 6 months. But 6,000 people can ride back at once. And the idea is that instead you would just use the HTLCs to swap in and out instantly. And people would compete and pay a fee for that. But the reason is because if there's a high number of these chains, you always want there to be plenty of time for the dispute to be raised. And so there's basically this hash on the withdrawal transaction that must match what's reported by the full node software. And so you have basically a really long time to notice if one hash doesn't match another hash. If it doesn't match, then that means that someone is doing something intentionally wrong. So the idea is it's a deterrent, because it kind of establishes guilt very, very, very quickly, and you're very, very, very unlikely to get away with it. This slow return, my guess is that it will never impact people, but nonetheless, we have to have some way of returning, because, but yeah, the idea is that there'd be like sort of specialists who would be, it's kind of like how if you go to the airport, you swap your US dollars for euros or something at the little thing. And you usually never have to, like at some point, those people will net up. They may accumulate like many more whatever yen than they need, and then they'll have to ship them in like a big box or something. But most people just pay a fee, and they can just swap it at the counter. So they don't have to move.
Get built into some sort of a DEX for easy swapping. Now,
Exactly.
where that runs into limits, what I'd imagine is just total liquidity in each drive chain. So let's just say like the fast one is like the popular one, and let's just say you start with 20 million coins. Just assume you have 20 million users, or 20 million coins are being actively used, which, big assumptions, but we'll forget about that. And let's just say like 18 million goes right into the fast one, the Thunder channel. And so people are doing that, but then there's a big surveillance event, and they're like, oh crap, we want privacy. 2 million goes into the Z chain, but then there's tons of demand for it, and more than can satisfy people swapping up, because there can only be 2 million in that chain. And so then you'd have to de-bridge.
That's right. That would be slow, and then it'd be instant to go back, but it would be slow to de-bridge. That's an interesting scenario, but I think for a couple of reasons, it's a very interesting theoretical scenario. But I would imagine that people would probably be most comfortable saving in the long run on the L1. So they'd kind of keep their retirement savings on the L1. And the other thing is, just because a chain is very popular in turning over, like spending, that doesn't mean that you need to have a very high quantity of coins there. So I think I did some napkin math on my blog, and with something like 5,000 to 10,000 coins, you could have like a North America chain that has very large blocks, like gigabyte-sized blocks. There's huge amounts of turnover in the thing where you're paying for all of your stuff, they're paying their suppliers. Somewhere your boss is getting paid, your boss pays you. You could have huge amounts of turnover with small, not that many coins actually on the chain as a whole. So I don't know exactly, if that napkin math will hold up in practice. But I think it's at least theoretically possible that you would only need to have you could only have like 1 million coins kind of out there among the L2s, and there could be 20 million on the L1, and you would still have a lot of. So I think that people would be hesitant to go out and keep their coins. The L2s would be more of something like, the pocket money or like the checking account, and then the coming back. The L1 would be more like your 401k or something, like a retirement account, to use like a kind of weird metaphor like that. So I don't think that scenario would come up, although it might. It's an interesting one, but I think that even if you want privacy, let's say you're on the privacy chain and you're a huge privacy enthusiast. If you've used the privacy chain a lot, now that you're coming out of it, you're coming out of the shielded pool, like the ominous they probably don't know who that is. So you're probably good on that UTXO. You just park it on L1. They know it came out of the Z side shielded pool, but they don't know who it is. So so that's not so bad.
So what's in terms of if I needed to, let's just say one drive chain became way more popular than the other, and there needed to be more liquidity on one than the other. What's the latency that it would take for me to get from one to the other? As far as let's say you're a swap, you're a swap provider, you're helping people to just swap one version for the other, but then you're massively running out of liquidity on one of these, and you're like, we need more in the system, so we need to take some Bitcoin and load it and de-bridge it from this one, and then bridge it back to this one to balance out the liquidity more. What's the how long would that take in terms of time, like hours, days, whatever?
No, I think that would be, my guess is that would be instant, but of course the D-bridge is the 3 to 6 months. But again, this is what I'm trying to say is there's probably going to be a reserve of coins on L1, even if they're not yours. So if you're this kind of person, you can work out this triangle trade where, because the L1 coins can go instantly, in 10 minutes, like one block, but they get one on-chain transaction. The L1 coins can go to the L2 immediately. And so whichever chain is running short, you could be you can say, listen, I don't, can I buy your L1 coins from you, or can I from anyone? Because so basically anyone can move them from L1 to L2 and then take the swap, or take the swap first and then move them from L1 to L2. So that part, that half of it is very easy. And that half of it is very easy. And then you would not, so like if you're saying there's a really high demand on one side and there's not as much of a demand, you can't as easily bring them from L2 to L1, but you have to push them from L1 to L2 is very easily. So you'd be able to cook up some kind of like triangle trade, HTLC thing. So you should be able to do it almost instantaneously, like within like an hour. So that part, that's why I'm not worried about the 3 to 6 month part.
Yeah.
I don't think it really
the,
ever
The
catches.
3 to 6 month part would more take into effect, let's just say you have a popular Thunder thing, you have the Z1. Eventually someone figures out that the Z1 can be made very fast and high capacity and have privacy, or have a optional, not privacy, but on that same chain. For whatever reason, the Z1 obsoletes the other one, and then you just decide, okay, we're going to close up shop here, and we'll take 3 to 6 months to just sort of wind down that drive.
Exactly, right.
And then move
and
on.
it could even be, it's unclear, but I think one possibility is, since the L1 miners are participants in the deposit withdrawal cycle, it's possible that these large pools they would have this as another revenue stream where they operate the big coin moving thing. And then, so they're the ones who say, because they're earning all these coins on all the chains because they're mining, and they're earning all these coins on L1. They can say, okay, listen, we'll give everyone, for a small fee, we'll give everyone on the new Z side Thunder super chain. We're giving you all these coins, and then meanwhile we want 102 coins on this, the defunct one for every 100 coins. They take this 2% fee or whatever it is. They all then own them there, and then they can walk them back very safely, knowing that to them, if you're a large miner, the coins on the L2 are the same as the L1 coins. Other people, there's maybe some fear that the drive chain thing will break down. I don't think so, but
yeah, it does seem like there's
them it's zero.
There's value to keep dry powder, as it were, or just unbridged coins. And it also seems like there will be a pretty big business as far as the arbitraging, the money changers, as it were. The change this coin for this coin, or lend someone some capacity on this chain or on this one in order if someone runs into a time crunch. So it seems like at least there's like a strong business case there for people who want to do that. Now, as far as the end user experience and like the wallets and stuff, do you foresee any, I don't know, how's that experience going to look like for like, if I want to have the master eCash wallet, I just want like whatever. It's probably got to sync a few different full nodes, right? It's got to sync with the eCash core one, like the big one, and then a few of these drive chains. And then you got to have a few.
Sync any full. You kind of choose which L2s you want. So if you're not on them, then you don't have to sync them. If you don't go there, you know what I mean? Those are like plugins or something.
So like you probably have a collection of coins in your wallet. They're all the same base currency, but they're technically different coins at different side chains, right? So you'd have like your private one and your cash one, and then maybe you'd have your EVM style, again, maybe not EVM, but their smart contracty one, so you can get some mad DeFi gains staking it over here, and then maybe a couple others. So you might have like 5 of the same coin or 3 of the same coin, but definitely on different things. And I guess they'd be shown as different pockets, sort of, even though like they'd all be seen as the same asset. You probably have a unified balance, right, of all of them. But then, as far as like the user experience is concerned, but then they would technically be in different pockets, right?
Right, and the wallet would want to say, like, because they're not quite the same, even though they exchange at a 1-to-1 value in BIP 300. If you have chains on the certain L2, they're kind of over there, and they're not on. If someone says, "Oh, can you pay me on this L2?" If you don't have the coins there, then without some other step, it won't work. So you have to pay them wherever they are. That's why I kind of think there'll be like a North America payments chain, like a Europe payments chain, like a Southeast Asia. There'll be like some geographically distributed. would be my guess about how it would work if it reached planetary scale. And so, yeah, you would have to swap. Like if you were going to get on a plane, you wouldn't have to go to the currency counter, but you would have to make like one of these transactions where someone you pay. You either go from L1 to like the Asia L2, or you do the swap so that you can pay people over there.
Yeah. So now let's talk about like long-term vision as far as like how this can play out. So you launch. People get some, they start playing around. Then what? I think you mentioned a couple of like percentage chances of either this happens or that happens. What are kind of like the long-term outcomes you can kind of foresee of this?
Well, yeah, there are a lot of outcomes. Like one is maybe people aren't that interested in this. That would be itself pretty interesting to like figure out like that's just where people's appetite is and what the demand is. It's also possible technology might not work. I think that it does, or that if it breaks, it can be easily leveled up into something that does work. But one possibility is that, I think the two interesting possibilities are that this technology succeeds really well, and then people in BTC just decide, oh, like this actually is a good idea. Why aren't we doing this? And then they flip. And then, of course, all these people will say that they were all the same people today who are big haters. They'll say that they were always in favor of this idea and that they always liked it. I just like they were always against COVID lockdowns and et cetera, et cetera. So,
of course, many such cases.
And so that's one possibility. Another possibility is that each of these L2s on eCash has, gains users and starts achieving its own network effect. And then a key property of this idea is that all the L2s are merge mined. And so there would be this geometric increase in transaction fee revenue, which means there'd be a geometric increase in hashing power. And that would make this chain have a larger and larger percentage of the SHA-256D mining hash rate. And I think that would be great, because in a way that would mean that its success would automatically prevent the BTC network from finding blocks. So in that way, they are very rivalrous.
Yeah. So is there any, like, is this it for the BTC chain? Like, is this?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think there's very little you can do to come back when you lose the culture of truth. I think it's very hard to come back from that, because people will self-censor, and it's like there's a whole parallel world where I think when everything's going well, like everything is self-healing. So like if your society is getting very healthy and people, now you have wealthier merchants and they can afford books and they can afford to patronize the arts, and the arts inspire people, and the culture improves. So I think kind of everything goes well at once. Like places have like a golden age, and then I think it's the reverse also. Like when things start to go badly, like now, how would someone be treated if they criticize the Lightning Network? In BTC, never before has it been easier to criticize the Lightning Network, because so much has been done, and it's so obviously like the problems are more obvious, and yet culturally it's still very hard. And the critics are treated as like weird fringe people, instead of just like people saying obvious things like you can't onboard 8 billion people to the Lightning Network like under any circumstances, and like no one is going to put up with the weird liquidity problems. And actually, it's at this point much more difficult to run a Lightning node for a regular person than it would be for them to run even like a large block. I mean, like even like a Bitcoin SV node would be easier for the regular person. And that's very telling. Regular person would just click Bitcoin as a regular person just running Bitcoin SV node would just click a button and they'd say you need a lot of hard drive space. They'd say okay, and they buy a hard drive and plug it in and wait. But most people find it people who actually tried to run the Lightning node, normal people will give up. So it's in practice, it's actually harder to run the Lightning node. So like, but that's just one example among many. So I don't know, but I think it's a good. This is the point. Is like, so maybe I'm wrong about all this, and we don't need eCash, and everything will be fine with BTC. In which case, that's great, because you've got your BTC shirt, and I'm not telling anyone to sell their BTC. I'm just saying we need this hedge. We need this lifeboat. We need this lifeboat leaving the. Most of the time, when you build a cruise ship, you don't need the lifeboats. So I kind of hope that we don't need this lifeboat. Yeah, but I'm just personally getting a little nervous. I mean, a lot of the things that people are saying and doing don't make any sense at all. And you know what I'm talking about. So I think it's difficult when you lose the culture of truth. And if you have a culture of truth, you can almost defeat anything eventually. But if you lose the culture of truth, I think it's only a matter of time before.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm honestly not sure. But it's been incredible to have made so much. I mean, again, I know people who paid 10 cents for Bitcoin and then sold it for $100,000. So I know people who did 1,000,000x in Bitcoin. And so, I mean, that's a huge win. That's like as good as life gets, Like, it's hard to complain after pulling something like that off. And now you have these people who, like, they heard about Bitcoin like after 2020 or something, and they're kind of like, this is like, it reminds me of, like, you remember the Mad Max movie where he's giving the water to the people and they're destitute and they have no, and he's like, oh, and he opens the thing and he says, too much water will make you soft. He shuts the water off. So that's like the new people now. And of course, these new people like don't know anything. Like, why can't we do a soft fork? Because a soft fork isn't a change to the protocol. It's opt-in, ignorable, and reversible. You could still run the old version if you want. So why is it treated differently than any other software change? I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. I think this definitely there are warning signs though. So that's what people really don't like is about this project is it shines some light on the shortcomings of BTC, and that's why they don't like it. And that's why I think though that will guarantee that people will continue to talk about it. Because they can't resist, like whatever, the 2 minutes hate or whatever you want to call it.
Well, I have to say, it is very interesting because I've been thinking about like proper forks of Bitcoin. And as far as I know, the only meaningful fork, if you could call it, might have been Bitcoin Cash in 2017. And of course, you had Bitcoin Gold, which persisted way longer than I thought it would. But that was, I kind of feel like Bitcoin Gold was understood to be like a shit fork. Like it was not,
Right. These were frivolities, and there was just like people discovered forking and they just thought, well, how many of these can we make? And this will be fun. And maybe some of them were even intended to discredit Bitcoin Cash by trying to lump them into like a weird category.
Yes. And so Bitcoin Cash, of course, is split off into SV and then also eCash. It would be hilarious if one of those split. I mean, I would not rule out Bitcoin SV forking into another Bitcoin SV. But
yeah, me either. Right.
That's a funny thing to think about. But the point is, Bitcoin Cash really shook Bitcoin, I would say, at the time. It was a monumental change. And I think for a variety of reasons, I think Bitcoin Cash did not short-term work out. I think they're reinvigorated and they're back in close to the top 10 or whatever. They're still there. But this has been like 9 years since a Bitcoin fork like that, like a real one. And I get that this is probably much less, I wouldn't say less, I don't want to be disrespectful by saying less real than the Bitcoin Cash one was, but that was more like this super important battle going on right then. Half of it went this way, half went that way, sort of, or 90% went this way, 10% went this way, whatever. In this case, it might not be as significant because, as you sort of pointed out, the support for Drivechains has been not where it probably should have been, but it still is a fork. It still shows that there is a division. Now, what do you think are the chances also, speaking of fun things, that there's a BIP 110 fork around the same time? And so
yeah, it's a funny question. I honestly thought, well, first of all, I'd agree that one thing that Bitcoin Cash had going for it was that there were already these two really passionate communities that have been disagreeing for like 7 years, and they were like really but yeah, I think that was also part of its downfall in a way. That was kind of like, well, I mean, it's tough. You need passion and you need a lot of stuff, and it's really hard. Like, and I don't. And it's funny also that we say Bitcoin Cash is like a failure because it briefly made it to the #2 spot on CoinMarketCap, and then it was, like it's still worth billions of dollars today. It's kind of just a bizarre thing. But yeah, I was thinking about that too. Like, I care so little about the op return. Like the idea of caring about what kind of op returns are in the standardness limit, like I think that's so ridiculous. Like it just doesn't even appear on my radar, and I've been like ignoring it because I just really don't care either way. Nonetheless, Luke has made. It's funny that people, of course, criticize this, but Luke has. I think he's made comments to the effect that say that if his soft fork doesn't activate, he will just proceed. Even he'll just like basically turn it into a hard fork and say it doesn't matter how many miners run this. Like this is the chain. I don't know if I'll have to lower the difficulty or how that will work, but
yeah, that's the thing. I mean, that's one reason I called it the caveman war. Is it, to my mind, and nothing of it made sense. Like it just seemed like not the sharpest tax in the room, kind of doing something like that. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is, right? Now here, so the last kind of, I guess question on this thing. Of course, if anyone has any questions in the comments, someone did have a question in the comments, which was about, are you supporting the pump.fund token called eCash that's launching? Someone's trying to scam. So
yeah,
ignoring that, they're having
not right now, but I don't know. Maybe I could work out some kind of weird deal with them somehow. I'm not sure. So, but I don't have anything to do with that as of now. And everyone should carefully watch of me on X/Twitter, which is a Truthcoin, and they should go to the eCash.com site because, of course, yeah, people have already been like people make like a fake GitHub for me. So it's really rough out there. People will be trying to trick you. It sucks. And I'm not Truthcoin on Telegram. I'm only Truthcoin on Twitter. I'm P Sztorc on Telegram. So
yeah. So I guess like sort of the final big question on this, barring any other questions who come in from the community, is so like the big Truthcoin thing is, I mean the big Drivechain thing is, it's like the alt killer, the shitcoin killer, right? Where it's like it obsoletes a lot of use cases. Now, that makes a lot of sense coming from, you tack that onto Bitcoin, right? Because now you have all these use cases attached to the Bitcoin store of value, the Bitcoin unit of account, the branding, all those other stuff. But now that you're kind of shedding a lot of that, how do you think that this new eCash is going to compete with just the whole down the CoinMarketCap ranking, like all those projects that have, maybe years in the business, have integrations in this, have brand recognition, have DEX integrations, whatever else? How do you think that practically works out? Like, how do you fight your way through the masses of these other coins?
Yeah, absolutely. This is why a lot of people like to stay in the Bitcoin world and even identify with it, even if they only own like $25 worth of Bitcoin. They say, well, I'm in the Bitcoin group and I'm a whatever. And so that's a big advantage. I'm a huge believer in network effects. I think it's much easier for the bigger coins. I think it's much easier for the more established coins. So yeah, I think it will be difficult, but I think all of the other projects, like, I can't speak for literally every single one of them, but the idea of Drivechain is that you could get different like full node software all with the same currency unit. So I'm kind of saying like it's a good thing that there's all these different like it's a good thing that there's a Zcash. It's a good thing that there's an Ethereum. It's a good thing that there is a Bitcoin Cash. And of course, all of them are going to try to be moved down the stack. Like, so when Ethereum came out, it was kind of like, this is Ethereum plus, it's just like Bitcoin plus smart contracts. So it's kind of like, oh, you can send money to people, but also you can do all this other stuff. I think I'm attempting a version of that where I'm saying like, okay, like literally the L1 is the number one altcoin, and then I have all the L2s are just, they are this other technology. Those will have network effects to overcome, but I think ours would have a unique ability to increase in network effect over time. Because well, this is what happens is like, okay, so like you had Bitcoin and then Bitcoin Cash split off, and then you had a debate between Omri and Craig, and then Bitcoin SV split off. So in the drive chain paradigm, you don't have this splitting off thing, and I think there's bound to be controversies. I think that's inevitable. So I think this is a decent way of excuse me, a decent way of dealing with these controversies. Oh my god, get some water.
Yeah, it's been going on for a long time.
I think it's sorry.
Got poisoned.
It's like
I think that
it's a decent They're
that
fast.
Gotcha.
They're so like you reach like a kind of a problem where the community grows to a certain size. People disagree over exactly what you should do. This type of thing happens routinely. So I think we're gonna do like an RFK Junior. That'd be terrible.
I'm watching eCash in a few minutes.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of, it will be difficult though to, like obviously it's very difficult to compete. I think the example of Bitcoin Cash is like, you had all these altcoins in 2017, and yet it was actually a hard fork that made it very quickly to the number 2 space. And it was then, I've published graphs in the past about how successful was Bitcoin Cash compared to like Solana or Avalanche or whatever. And you could say as a percentage of the top 2, so you could say Bitcoin, Ethereum, and X. You do this graph where you say, what were the market caps? So you say, how close was it to breaking in the top 2? And you can then do this, you repeat this graph for like Solana, Bitcoin Cash, whatever. And then you could see that actually Bitcoin Cash did much better. It only had like a year of life before it started to fall, but it did much better than the altcoin. So I actually think I agree with you that really Bitcoin Cash was the only real fork. A lot of the other ones were kind of like designed to fail.
Yeah.
And a lot of the other ones were designed like kind of as a joke. So the only time we did a Bitcoin hard fork, it skyrocketed to the number 2 place. And I think actually there were a lot of problems with the Bitcoin Cash hard fork. So they had tremendous community support, yes, but it was created in August, and then in November they kind of told everyone this is while Segwit 2x was still going on, and then they kind of canceled Segwit 2x and said this is the new large blocker project after it had already been out for months and people had maybe sold already. So I'm kind of warning people in advance, whereas they kind of was like already been out, and it was like already been out, and it was not the official. There was still saying, and there were like tweets and stuff. People are talking about, is Segwit 2x still the large blocker project?
People forget that people like Roger Ver were not supporters in the early days. Like,
right.
I have it as one of the times on this channel when Roger appeared, he's literally talking about, and there's this new thing called Bitcoin Cash, and it's a big block version, and I wish them well, but like it's very sad what's happened to Bitcoin. He just was not very into it or familiar at all at the time. Again, on this channel, and then it took a while to get on board. And to be fair,
it wasn't until November. Yeah,
the Segwit 2x thing was, as again a big blocker remembers, I guess, was a little bit of a bait and switch where the Segwit signaling was like 30-40% in miners, and then after Segwit 2x it went up to 90 and got implemented, but then the 2x part never happened. It kind of got rugged afterwards. And I noticed the UASF and all that other stuff that came about did not intensify until Segwit got activated. It was very kind of deliberate. So understandably it took some wind out of the sails. Also, people had never dealt with a fork before. Exchanges didn't know what to do. People were sending money to the wrong addresses. Like all this kind of stuff was just, it was kind of chaotic. And so having like a prepared fork might help a little bit for sure. But one thing's for sure, I think that the chances of this doing well have a lot to do with hitting the ground running in terms of like doing things, getting a few key integrators, whether it's a payment processor, whether it's a wallet that wants to do these kinds of things, whether it's some getting an exchange ready to like switch between all the different coins, kind of like a built-in instant exchanger. And yeah, I mean, and it's not really a question, it's just sort of a comment. I do think that that's going to be the deciding factor of how well this whole thing does, is how much momentum you can get going. It could be listen, you know, the odds of any new chain launching and doing well long term are not very high, but the odds would be, it could be the surprise attack that is sort of needed to just come out like, oh my gosh, this actually taking some market share in some areas and showing us up. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. Now, I don't know if anyone's asked this, but it is absolutely none of my business. So you could just say, yeah, no thanks, I'm not going to answer that. What do you intend? This is what all the maxis would probably think, though. Do you intend to sell your actual BTC immediately, or are you just going to?
No, I really don't. No, I see it as a lifeboat, you know, on the Titanic. So I don't think we should want to do this, but we should. If you see the Titanic, you know, headed for an iceberg, this is a good time to, like, you know, check the lifeboats and maybe like make sure there are no holes in them and start, like, you know, whatever. I know they probably didn't have caulk back then, but you would want to start like caulking them up, you know, or whatever they do, you know, varnishing them or making sure they're still waterproof as soon as possible. So yeah, I mean, what do you think is the future for BTC?
I'm not 100% sure. I will say where I was wrong first, because everyone likes to say, oh, I was right about this, or I predict this, I expect to be right. Where I was wrong is I thought that the unsustainability of the system would kind of implode on itself within a few years. I didn't realize, like, you know, after 2017. Like, I thought it'd be like 2020, 2021, it starts to really give way to other things. And it kind of, you know, where I was wrong on that is I think that maybe I underestimated that the network effects were some of the more powerful part. It wasn't the tech itself, it was the network effects that were very entrenched, but also the base. The other thing is Bitcoin, in my opinion, has persisted as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, even though hobbled in that. But what's happened is, like, it was a peer-to-peer electronic cash system for this many transactions, and it's remained that way. And what has happened, though, is it's stayed that way, but the wealth pyramid of that has just gone up. And so it has grown. It has, even though the transaction capacity has not, the actual value transmission capacity has kind of gone up. And I kind of feel like when it hits that ceiling, where, I mean, paying for Iranian ships and stuff like that, that's one of the higher ceilings you'd have, right? When you have nation states paying for big things like that, it doesn't get much higher than that as far as that. And having liquidity for that, like, if you want to send $1 billion, you can on Bitcoin. You can't really on many other chains. It's not there. You can't liquidate it on the other side, for example. So I think that it's kind of starting to get to that point where it's topping out. I also think that it's by staying the same, pretending everything's okay, is kind of like let it coast for a while. But there's a couple events that are coming up. They're going to require changes, and I think that either Bitcoin's going to get a second win by making some very reasonable changes, and I think Drivechains should be one of those, but probably won't be, or it will fail with these changes, and then that's like the decline is the sustainability ticking time bomb of, like, how do you pay the miners the security budget after each halving? How does it keep happening? And do you still trust Bitcoin as an investor? Do you still trust Bitcoin if it's secure, if its hash rate is actually going down over time, as opposed to, you know, still going up but not as high as the price? So that's number one. And number two is the quantum thing. I don't think that the quantum computing threat is like, again, I'm so not smart enough to really intelligently talk on this, but my gut feeling is it's not going to be a huge problem in the short term. The problem is it makes Bitcoin make an annoying binary decision, which is you have to either migrate to post-quantum addresses and then Satoshi's coins and all the others. You either have to let them be stolen, in which case you reveal the true market cap of Bitcoin by saying, oh, it was only 12 million coins were actually accessible. The rest were lost, for example. And then you have massive dumping on the market, and then the store value narrative takes a hit. Or you have to freeze people's coins. And you have to assume that they're no longer accessible, but they could have been people's coins. And then you're like, why would I buy Bitcoin if it can be confiscated arbitrarily in the future? So those things, I think, will shake it at some point, and then it will start to have I don't think it's going to be a precipitous crash. I think it'll start to just like, it hits escape cruising altitude with the institutions and everything, governments the way it is now. I think this is close to the ceiling, and then it just stays there and sort of shakes down slowly over time as other things take the headlines and take the users, and then eventually people are like, hey, remember that Bitcoin one? It's still at rank like 12 or 13, but it's maybe not number one yet. So yeah, that's my thought.
I think it's a pretty good thought. I think in particular, the quantum idea, I think this speaks to like people's fear, because it's like it's such a shock to the existing culture, because the culture is like Bitcoin is perfect and immortal. Mm-hmm. Right? So this quantum thing shows up and it's like, oh no, wait, maybe it's not, or maybe we don't know, or maybe this is just FUD, but people kind of know in the back of their head that they can't tell.
Yeah.
So I would agree that triggers people, I think.
Yeah, there's just so many like the current trajectory goes to the abyss, and Bitcoin's changes since 2016, maybe whatever it was with SegWit at that trajectory, that almost everything that is done to help Bitcoin out or improve it or improve its market standing has all been off chain, right? It's all been other things. Either it's been trying to do Lightning stuff, or it's been stuff like getting it into strategic reserve legislation in the US. It's been getting institutions, been Saylor buying it up. It's been all this kind of stuff, and eventually start to run into like those key fundamental technical problems that Bitcoin has, which is not enough miner revenue long term, because why would you use the chain to that degree, or an increasing degree from now? And then you have to do something about the quantum threat. Those are technical changes. Bitcoin has not made technical changes, really, that are meaningful technical changes. So I don't know how you'd paper over that with non-technical solutions. Like how do you bring money into the miners without bringing money into the miners? Like, do you start a nonprofit? Do you have government start to subsidize this? Like, what do you do? And then what do you do as far as like the quantum stuff? Do you just have this like post-quantum signature scheme that people can move their wallets to that uses some Taproot, whatever the hell? I've seen someone talk about something like this, by the way. Do you just do that and then just let quantum attackers take everyone else's coins who haven't moved there? And like, is that what you do? Like, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, most of the creative things that would work the most effectively in terms of like getting everyone to emergency switch from quantum vulnerable to quantum safe, like that would probably involve some kind of like hard fork temporary block size increase for like those who want to go in one direction, like in the turnstile. It says like, okay, if you want to quantum shield your UTXO, then you have unlimited block space for that, so that we can all do it quickly. Not only does that involve like all kinds of crazy, block size debate all over again, but that would then involve like chaos of the hard fork, and that would also force people to like, use their private keys to make a signature like really quickly. There would be all this kind of chaos.
Yeah.
So that cuts against the whole Bitcoin like property rights, immortal Bitcoin trope.
Yeah, there is just oddly enough, like I kind of feel like the best solution, the most do nothing solution is the most taboo, which is institute a tail emission And again, none of this is something
Yeah.
I like. But institute a tail emission that starts just random idea is like, what if you started by just taking from coins that hadn't moved in over 10 years and just turned them back into the block reward? And if you ever ran out of things in the security pool, it would start inflating the supply past 21 million. And so basically, it's first takes from all the dead coins, and then if you want to prevent 21 million from being exceeded, you have to donate to this one address that then would go into the block reward and kind of maintain things the way it is.
Well, these are all weird things that people do instead of Drivechain, because Drivechain just says you have unlimited number of merge bind L2s, and you can collect an unlimited, you can process unlimited and increasing number of transactions and it doesn't matter if the rate of transaction grows forever, geometrically, and you can just collect more and more and more and more and more money. So, Drivechain, this is just one of the many things that Drivechain would completely solve, and we wouldn't even need to be talking about it. I don't know about if, we have one of the L2s, one of the Drivechains is quantum resistant. So we have an L2 that has just basically a signature key scheme that's just quantum resistant. I don't know if that's to what extent that would placate the quantum doomers, because it wouldn't be on L1 and it wouldn't necessarily be on any other L2s. It would at least, though, be like a demonstration of something that could work, and it would also end the bike shedding to some extent, because it would say, well, here's this one thing that someone tried and it worked. So then, because right now there's going to be lots of bike shedding over exactly which thing. And so the whole thing will become kind of a circus. It'll be interesting to see how strong the paralysis is in the face of quantum. And even now, it's kind of like, people have proposed, Jameson Lopp, et cetera, people propose these things, and everyone's like, well, we hate it. It's very easy to hate something when you don't have to come up with your own thing, of course. So I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what to make of it all myself, but that's why I think we need, we got to have those lifeboats ready.
Yeah, of course. All kinds of different things. It will be interesting to see how it develops, because it's kind of like it seems like one of the biggest concerns, I guess, or one of the biggest issues with the way the crypto market is played out is you either have single purpose alts, which was like kind of like, that's like 2017 era type 2014, 2017, which is like, let's do the thing that Bitcoin didn't do, this one thing, and then just kind of stick there. And then you have no one's trying to copy Bitcoin in 2026, really. Maybe you, that's about it, right? But everyone else is not. Everyone else is trying to do the next high-powered, super scalable EVM style, VM to the max, out your mother's ass kind of thing. That's what they're doing. And it does seem that having a multiple use case crypto that's still you can have you can do the one thing, but you can also do other one things, and it's kind of like an alt collector, right? Where it's you're kind of launching as many altcoins as you want with this. And so instead of launching a new altcoin, you just do it on this one. So it keeps the capital all in there. And so it could be
right. Exactly. Yes. So that's the hope, is that, it can't succeed. If with only a few people get involved, it can't succeed. I think, it's going to be comparable to Bitcoin itself, where Bitcoin, was misunderstood for a little while, but people slowly realized that actually this is the only long run sustainable type of a thing, I think. But, of course, could be wrong about that. But yeah, I think the sidechain idea has many benefits for if you have really good tech. If you have to do an altcoin, then you're competing against other altcoins, which is kind of a really big drag, because you have to compete on all these other dimensions, as you pointed out before. But instead, if everyone does those together as a common project in the whole system, now you don't need to do all that other stuff. You just need to have the best identity idea or whatever it is.
Yeah, many such cases. Well, let's wrap this whole thing up. We'll send you everyone to @truthcoin on X, I guess, or the website is ecash.com, which, that's the linchpin of the whole name. If you are angry so please view and share this podcast so I get more. I need to get over 20,000 views on YouTube at least, because then Omari Sachet will be proven correct that I did this just for the cheap clicks, and I will get more cheap clicks than I got cheap clicks on his interview, which probably was botted based on like the amount of I did not expect that one to be the one to really take off. So it could have been botted, whatever. Again, I'm not making accusations, but point is, please get it above his cheap clicks. But yeah, just get some eCash with the fork. You're gonna pre-sell Satoshi's coins, right? You're holding an estate sale.
Yes, we have already.
Satoshi.
Yeah, we have already, basically. Yes.
Nice. So where do people do that if they want to do that?
Well, I don't know. I said I'm trying to only do it with but yeah, people can DM me on Twitter. I mean, not on either Twitter or Telegram on P Sztorc, PSZTORC on Telegram. Please don't. I'm just, who knows, all the scammers. It's just going to be, I fear because the industry is the worst and there's a million scammers everywhere. But if you DM me on Twitter and I'll talk to you about it. I would rather have people who really experts who know what they're getting into and that type of thing. So,
yeah, absolutely. Well, sounds good. Thanks everyone for watching. This has been a fun show. Please subscribe and then also follow Paul and all his endeavors, and enjoy the shit show in a little bit. It's gonna be fun. We saw the eCash Omari's vision people upset at the name, and some other people. Wonder who the next group of people to be upset will be, and that'll always be fun. So thank you for your master troll work. Are you going to be at the Bitcoin conference, by the way? I forget.
I will.
Okay. Well, without giving too much information away, so will I. So run into either of us, both of us, and yell at us about the name or whatever you want to yell at us for stealing Satoshi's coins. And all of the above. All right. See you guys. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Adam, we're here because we love you. And we're all tired of watching you get abused.
Abused? By who?
Oh, hi, I'm Visa. I charge you 29% interest, 3% foreign fees, and make you wait 3 days to see if your payment went through.
But I thought you were my friend.
No, Dash is your friend. Instant, private, under a penny, and with Dash Spend, you walk into over 100,000 stores and pay like a boss.
All ready, yeah? Awesome, thank you very much. Feel alive, guys. This is awesome. Tastes like freedom. And I save 5% by using the app.
That's the Dash High, baby.
Let's go.
Download the mobile wallet, one tap, boom, financial sovereignty.